Thanks, buddy. Illustrious panel on predictably AI, as Paul says. This is going to be fun. We're going to talk about AI. You guys haven't heard anything about AI yet today, nor will you for the rest of this conference. Though I do expect and hope that this will be maybe a little bit more practical than some of the discussions, some of the pablum that we often hear about AI. So you guys will be the judges. I think right now we're in a moment in our profession where there is going to be more change in the next 5 years than there has been in the previous 5 decades. And I say this without hyperbole. And of course, one of the main reasons for that, right, is the AI revolution. And so we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about that in the context of crisis and risk management. Before we do that, though, I guess I should introduce my fellow esteemed colleagues here. And so Patrick and Dustin, who are not on stage yet, but will, I guess, be arriving on stage for the second portion, the live action portion of our discussion, I'll introduce now, and then we'll call them up to the stage later. So Dustin Johnson's our Chief Commercialization and Innovation Officer for Weber Shandwick. And Patrick Chopum, he is our Consulting Business Lead for Weber IO, which is our AI business, one of the fastest growing parts of our business, as you might expect. And then last but not least, Shannon Susko, who was formerly Chief Communications Officer of Centene, which is a Fortune, I think, 10 company. 22, something like that. One of the largest companies that maybe is less unheard of than some of the other large companies. But nevertheless, I know you're running a very large communications function there. And so Shannon and I are going to talk. She's going to share her perspective on a lot of where she thinks the profession is going from the perspective of a CCO who has run one of the very large communications functions and works often with CCOs. Shannon is a senior advisor for us at Weber Shandwick. Also, a quick shout out to the panelists earlier. Susan Howe, I think, was on the first one, and I always love to hear Russell talk about the BCG research, which we are going to get into a little bit here shortly, because I think of all the research that I've seen on the future of the profession in the context of the implications of AI, it's probably the most interesting. And so I think I'll start with the research, actually. So you guys probably will remember, or those of you who are here will remember, or those of you who've seen the research from BCG that Russell led will know that BCG has essentially found that, or based on all this analysis they did, they've determined that 80% of the work that we do in communications fits into what they call the AI collaboration sweet spot. And what that means in more simple English is that the things that humans do best, which are what? Judgment, creativity, intuition, married with the things that AI does best, speed, scale, maybe increasingly precision, it creates a force multiplying effect. And so 80% of the work that we do, according to BCG, falls into this sweet spot with this force multiplying effect. And the force multiplying effect is what's important because humans on their own, you guys know it can be produced. AI on its own, it can be produced, but it's the marriage of the two that actually are going to create a much greater impact on the future of our profession, and they're going to benefit from this force multiplier effect. And so, Shannon, why don't we start by talking a little bit about the BCG research and whether it's the AI collaboration sweet spot or just even more broadly, what did you find most interesting in it?
Thanks, Jim, and great to be with all of you today. I think one of the things that's most intriguing to me is that it speaks to the art of the possible within the function right now. And we've all seen the kind of scary headlines about reduction in force from AI and opportunities to optimize the function through cost-cutting mechanisms. But the reality is we actually have a unique and timely opportunity to optimize the function in ways that leverage and bring the best to bear of human-led and AI-assisted functionality, right? And that means having juniors and teams that are bringing their highest and greatest potential to the job, and being able to focus on things that can drive greater value across the organization. CCOs and CCAOs today are sitting in a really dynamic, fast-moving role. It's always been that way, but ever more so now, right? You are the advisor to a CEO. You are the chief storyteller. You are the cultural ambassador. You are the transformation officer. You are helping to navigate what is increasingly becoming a 5D chessboard, right? And there are puts and takes on that, and any opportunity that you can use to leverage AI to increase your speed, your agility, your precision, again, in a human-led, AI-assisted capacity, is gonna bring you the ability to optimize your function, both during normal course and transformative periods. And the hard part is, right, what we don't know is often fearful, right? And so hopefully people are exploring and engaging and trying more with AI tools now and kind of demystifying some of those concerns, because there is such incredible application and use case within our function. And it's not just making sure that those media reports are done more efficiently, right? We're gonna go into examples later today on much more sophisticated applications for it. But I think to the extent that CCOs and CCAOs can help organizations embrace the opportunity and think of it not just in a binary cost-cutting scenario, but as a more optimizing and complementary consideration for the future of your function, then we're all gonna be in better hands for it.
Yeah, that's great. And in terms of the future of the function, what do you see, what do you predict in terms of changes that are either already occurring or you expect to occur enabled by AI?
I think there is, to Russell's point earlier and to other organizations who've also looked at this, there's great opportunity in the space for application and communications. But I also think beyond the functionality shift, the ways it will make doing the working, the blocking and tackling that we do every day easier, is also a strategic benefit and imperative, right? With more data, with more information, you can be more agile, you can be more precise, you can be more prescriptive, and ultimately you can lead to better results. But I think there's also going to be some long-term shifts that happen, and just kind of prognosticating on something I've been thinking about over the last couple months is a lot of you who are on the corporate side or a lot of you who are on the agency side, right? You're all facing different challenges with how you think about AI. But systemically, from an industry perspective, you have a lot of corporates that have agency rosters of 5 to 10 agencies. They handle everything from a wide range, from brand to crisis to media to everyday digital technology, right? And as corporations want to get the best out of their agencies and agencies want to get the best service and delivery they can, everyone wants to put corporations' data in their sandbox and use their proprietary tools and technology to be able to advance the services they're giving them. Now, at some point, insurance towers are going to call the ball here and see heightened risk of putting all that corporate data across 5 or 10 or 15 different agencies, right? And as a result, corporations at some point are going to be forced to winnow down the number of service providers they've got guiding them, because there's a data risk here. And so I think it's going to have both an opportunity, but also a shift, a seismic shift on how services are delivered and who's delivering them for you, because you probably aren't going to have the luxury of 5 to 10 agencies anymore. And so as we see that shift and that consolidation, I think it's important for us to be planning not just for the future of our function, whether you are sitting on the agency or the corporate side, but the future of what this means based on the work you're delivering in your capacity, whether you are an agency advisor or whether you are a corporate client who is trying to figure out how to optimize the function. We're all kind of similarly situated there. We're trying to figure out the puts and takes on how we can best use it, what it means for us, and how we can support the sustainability of the teams we're leading.
One of the things that we hear, I know because we've heard this even together in some of the meetings we've had with heads of comms or chief corporate affairs officers, is some version of like, I really need to get on that AI thing, maybe said slightly less glibly. And there does seem to be a very wide spectrum of how aggressive people are adopting. So what's your take on where the profession is currently? And yeah, maybe start there, where it is currently.
It's a great question, but I think the dichotomy of where people sit in that, I'm going to call it transformation with AI, is pretty wide, right? You have organizations who are like, oh, in In 26, we're getting Copilot. Do you know what that is, right? And you have organizations that are running agentic AI solutions and using LLMs and bots to be able to advance the work they're doing, not only within the comms function, but much more broadly from an operational perspective across their enterprise. And I think depending on the nature of your organization and where you sit, if you are a startup versus a long-standing blue chip company that's been around for 100 years, right? Your investment in AI on a broad-based level probably varies dramatically. And so I think it leads to what you and I have been seeing, right, is that there's a great degree of spread between organizational engagement with AI, reliance on AI, and proficiency on AI. And so for those of you who may be on that early stage and, jump in, try it, play with it, get comfortable with it, right? Some of this is getting acclimated to something new, right? I mean, Y2K, everyone thought the world was going to end and we all were just fine and lived to tell about it. I think to a certain extent, the fear over what's new inhibits our ability to embrace new technology and new opportunities. And so some organizations, that we've seen have been very far down that journey, right? Obviously, Russell talking earlier about what BCG is doing. But I think the important thing is that everyone is learning and coming to it on their own terms and figuring out how they can apply it and find the use case that works for their organization. But comms plays a critically important role in that because you're not only figuring out how to use it for your function, you also are a cultural storyteller within an organization on how it's not scary, how it's the art of the possible to make your lives easier, right? If we try this, we may be able to endeavor down new paths that make life easier, allow us to do our highest and best work, reach more potential, and help to service the organization in ways that are unique, different, and perhaps maybe better than they were 5 months ago. If you think about your own lives, right, your reliance on Claude or ChatGPT or Grok or others is probably hockey sticked up in the last 5 months. Use case in the last 8 months is incredible. And so I think as corporations model what individuals are doing and we see that greater application, you're going to have, that spread's going to shrink over time.
What do you think in terms of use cases are the most compelling ones you've seen so far?
I don't pretend to judge because every individual's sitting in a position and managing different risk and different corporate situations and strategic situations. But personally, I think the ability to optimize and leverage the use of AI in corporate reputation and risk management are critical. I would be willing to invest there in ways I wouldn't in other areas because the ability to drive real-time response that is more precise, based on data and insights, and gives me an edge of information, whether I am dealing with a risk that is local or global, right? In an era where reputation is akin to valuation, you can't afford not to be prepared. And AI, particularly for reputation management and crisis preparedness, gives us that additional alpha, right? That additional benefit of where we can find and leverage tools that are going to help put us in a better position, right? 5 years ago, we would have been doing research for weeks on something that we can do now in minutes. And so the ability to make decisions on a dime in real time that are data-backed, insight-informed, again, human-led, AI-assisted, because I'm not suggesting that AI is replacing the ability for us to make decisions as communicators. But the ability to leverage those insights and information, particularly in crisis situations, I think provides a truly meaningful and differentiated edge.
Yeah. And we'll show some of this, I guess, shortly when we do the demo. Before we go there, though, maybe 2 questions. How about one on what this means for the workforce in the industry in the next 3 to 5 years?
I'm so glad you mentioned that because I think so many times we're in conversations that are very focused on how do we do it? How do we optimize our team? What's the ROI? How can I achieve whatever reduction I'm looking for in concert with my CFO, right? But I also think this is a timely moment for us as communications leaders to take a pause and think about not only the execution of the business, but what this means for succession planning and the sustainability of our teams. Right now, you're going to have a lot of juniors who are feeling disintermediated by technology, right? And you've got future generations of people coming into your workforce who aren't going to have the boots on the ground learning, managerial experience, training, the very things that gave all of us the edge in the work that we've done to get to where we are today. And so I think we have to both embrace the technology and the opportunity, but be equally planful about how we are putting it into practice in our teams so that we are creating a culture that's sustainable for within our function and also supports our organizational dynamics, right? We don't want anyone to feel like we're disintermediated. We want to make sure that we're building a culture that's inclusive of both the technology and the talent necessary to leverage that technology. And in doing so, make sure that we're creating a sustainable function, right? That we have future generations of leaders who will be joining our teams who may not know the things we know because they didn't go through the initial early stage of their career that we did, which puts greater emphasis and focus on academia, right? And what institutions and universities are going to be doing to better equip and prepare those first-year employees to come into a workforce that's going to look very different in the years ahead than it has in the past. And again, I think that's both an exciting opportunity, but also a moment of responsibility for us. How are we thinking about it? How are we planning for it? How are we preparing organizations to make sure that we are readying our workforces appropriately for what that means downstream?
Yeah, I think one of the things that came up in a recent town hall that we were doing, we were talking about this, is the idea that you should not be worried about being replaced by AI. You should be worried about being replaced by the person who's better at using AI than you are. Yep. Which I stole that line from someone else because I like it. I find it to be much more accurate than what the more lazy version of that is. So I think we should shift probably to the demo so that we can show people a little bit about what we're talking about more specifically when it comes to using particularly agentic AI in the context of crisis and risk management. And so I think that everyone in this room hopefully understands the difference between like using AI as just a random set of tools, which can be helpful. Everyone here has their own enterprise ChatGPT access, hopefully, or Copilot or whatever it is. And then the taking of those tools and maybe the layering of them, having them talk to each other, having them work together, then maybe building some custom tech on top of that. What we have done at Weber is we've built an entire AI spine, call it Halo, and it's powered by Google, our partner Google. Google is our tech partner. We announced this just, I think, as recent as maybe last week. And one of the things that we do with it, so we use it for all of our client work, and within Halo, all the client teams we have custom tech and agents and projects that are specific to the clients that they're working on. And we have made a lot of productivity strides as a result of this, but much more important than that, the client work is getting much faster and more precise and higher quality and easier to scale. And within Halo, we also are building agentic systems that are very specific for certain things. And so the one that we're going to show you is very specific to crisis and risk management. And the simple way to think about an agentic system is that it is built with a ton of very specific task agents that are operating autonomously, and they're orchestrated together. And so when you see what we're about to show you, first the front end, which you'll see a bunch of the more routine tasks associated with issues and crisis and risk management automated. You just know that, and then we'll also show you the back end where you can actually see all of the agents and how they work together. And this, of course, is the future of much of our profession, much broader than just crisis and issues and risk management. So, Dustin, welcome to the stage, and Patrick, welcome to the stage, and I'll let you guys drive this.
All right. Thanks, Jim. Appreciate it. All right. Well, first we have to say a very quick prayer to the demo gods, because we are going to be live here. This is a demo environment, but it's still live, so thank you. And then thank you to
this is also, by the way, the first time we have ever publicly demoed Halo, and this agentic system in particular, though, as you might imagine, we have...
Number one crisis, don't run live demos.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And then thank you to Patrick. He's our engineer in this scenario, tickling the ivories over there. Yeah. All right, we're going to dive in. So like Jim said, I just want to give you a quick kind of grounding in what this is, and then we'll show you the system, right? So this is the 4 layers of the AI infrastructure that we call Halo. You can click through. It has a user experience element, so where our teams work. But then we've built modules to collaborate with our clients that are agentically orchestrated modules. We're going to show you the risk and crisis module of Halo. All built on top of, to Jim's point, a number of very custom-built agents that power the work. Orchestrated with an orchestration layer. We'll show you that layer as we get into this. But behind the scenes, these are all the agents working together to deliver this experience. And then I can't overestimate this enough. This is powered by custom data partners and decades of Weber knowledge built into the system. The last thing we want to do is kind of the sea of sameness that comes with kind of traditional off-the-shelf LLMs. I think everybody has access to those. Those are not unique. We build our data into this and our knowledge. We also partner with our clients in very secure environments, Google's secure environments, to load their data in and their ways of working in, their knowledge in, so that when we're working with them, everything is truly customized for them. All right. Quick little plug for Axiom as well. This is part of the larger IPG data spine and is a significant part of what makes this unique as well. All right. Enough nerding out. Let's get into the demo. All right, so this is Halo. This is the kind of risk and crisis module of Halo. You can see we have a handful of demo clients in here. We're going to start with a demo client called Verdanix. We're going to get into a crisis kind of moment. Oh, it works. How about that? All right, no, good. But even before you get to this moment, we already have our monitoring agents that are constantly, we all do media monitoring, but we have agents that are going out and looking across the web for potential risks or things that meet a certain risk threshold for this client, right? And so once it's met that threshold, our agents will create this crisis detail page and immediately fill out with all the information that it has. So you can see the assessment on the left, kind of by customer, employee, and investor. It's going to tell us, hey, how fast is this thing moving? How much virality does it have? How much influence does it have? And then ultimately, what's the kind of boycott or emotional intensity risk of the thing, right? So these are agents, each individually kind of assessing this and populating. Agents have also now created this scenario summary and taken, when you see the content here, this is 10 different agents putting this together to make it as detailed as possible. And then lastly, the agents also take a cut at multiple scenarios, right? So I mean, a key thing, any kind of crisis management is understanding all the scenario planning. So what if this takes off in virality? What if it maybe kind of fizzles out and we don't want to take too much action because that could actually create more damage? The system has already taken an assessment at which of these it thinks is highly likely and what the probability is, and that's what you're seeing here. All right, engineer, what else, Patrick? What else is driving this?
Yeah, so behind the scenes, as Jim mentioned, there's like tens of dozens of agents running these scenarios. One of the key things about this interface is we're actually approaching most of our client programs with scenario planning in mind. And so when you think about the anatomy of a comms organization, we think scenarios, we think issues, we think campaigns, we think programming. Behind the scene, that DNA is actually built into these agents. And so we have dozens of agents that start to think about those scenarios and then start to map them together. So what you see here, high probability scenario, moderate probability scenario, minimum, these are actually built on our own knowledge based on scenario planning, right? And then, moreover, when we start to think about what are people doing, well, the agents create the initial scenarios. We now start to think about using our time differently. Shannon mentioned, how are we going to use our time? Well, frankly, the human in the loop is more now context engineering. We've talked a lot about prompt engineering. We're actually moving into an age of context engineering, which is what is going on with the world? What's going on with media? What's going on with stakeholders? What's going on with our audiences at large? And then what are we going to do about it? So now we can start to map these scenarios into how we would manage a crisis, using our own expertise of not only the client, but the media environment.
Yeah, in any place you see a click to review, this is a human in the loop moment. So, I mean, Russell talked about it earlier. All of this starts human first, practitioner led. So this is a moment where assess the probability, and things may have changed in the last even hour or so. So you want a human validating, and then all of this gets recorded in the system, so there are audit trails, and we can go and understand kind of who made what changes when.
Right, but nothing should go out into the world without the human in the loop final blessing, right? It's like you can automate, frankly, everyone here should be automating the first draft of almost everything that they do, but you can't automate the last review of everything you do. That's where it falls apart.
So let me just very quickly, the scenario we have at hand is we've got a global multinational that has a production issue, and it's also done some layoffs. What are we going to do about it? And that's the core scenario. Secondarily, there's been not only activist upheaval, there may be some stakeholders, audiences, and former employees that are causing a rise on the social landscape. So just to give you a little framing, what we'll actually do is, this is actually the same scenario, but now, again, something has actually happened. There's a funding issue now.
Yeah, you can see a GoFundMe now has shown up where an employee started a GoFundMe, they were laid off, and the employer is choosing not to contribute to it, which is causing other chatter in the system. And you can see the boycott intensity actually increased.
So this is
the emotional intensity increased because of this.
So before I go in, just had to frame that, let's take a look at the actual assets from an agentic standpoint. Oh, actually, you want to do comparables real quick while we're at it?
Yeah.
Let's put them on the screen.
Yeah, so the other thing the system does is it immediately goes out, takes the context of the crisis, and looks for comparables, looks at other crises that have hit that are publicly available or potentially even within our knowledge base that we would load into the system. And you can assess, okay, what can we learn from this? What can we apply? It's just another layer of knowledge, another layer of intelligence that we give to the practitioner to help assess the situation and do their job better.
So for every issue or client program we load in, we have agents that go and look at comparables and are always listening. So we don't have to go and necessarily scrape what's going on. It does the pre-research for us. So that is the sort of just the grounding of the platform. Let's actually take a look at, very quickly, the actual scenarios. So within a scenario, let's go to the medium one for fun here. I don't know what happens here, but let's see. The core assets that the system generates right off the bat. So based on the analysis of the scenario, the input that we've gathered both from a media landscape as well as our client knowledge, it also has client information that we've worked with the client to really load in their context. It generates a holding statement. It generates automatically a press release, some Q&A, some social post, a summary of the actual timeline of the situation that you're managing, as well as an employee letter. So this is just framing the agents generating assets. So the comm strategist has a starting place just to react to. Jim said this is not something we just automatically publish. This is just a workplace that they can iterate and sort of understand perspective.
And in fact, we won't let this move forward without somebody clicking to review to advance the situation forward.
So I could go in and review this right here. So this is a review of the press release, and here's some copy that gives some context, and it also gives you, based on us having client understanding as well as our own intelligence from Axiom or Oru, our persona partners, the data gets loaded in. And what ends up happening is on the right-hand side, since this program was tied to specific audiences, consumers, activists, or investors, what would resonate with them? How would they potentially react? And over here, you can start to see suggestions. And so what I could do is, from an activist standpoint, click on release a detailed public report explaining what happened from a safety issue standpoint. So I'm pushing a live button right now. So things are being generated on the back end by agents. And what will end up happening is it'll actually take the press release and take that consideration and put it side by side. So now an individual working on the program will literally see what's the difference in the piece of content. Lo and behold, here's the actual detail. This is a live piece of content that came back up. And so as a human managing this program, I get to see, holy cow, this is an audience insight. Here's the difference in the press release. I'm going to review this real quick. And I could then endorse it. Actually, let me just accept the updates. and then endorse it. What'll end up happening is it'll save it side by side. So the initial program and how it got generated, and then you start to see right here, it shows I touched this and I've reviewed this press release. And then whoever wants to work on it next can know that I've done it. And there's actually a history of all the things. So I can click on
if you click the history, And this even before we went and did the review, this is the audit trail of everything the LLMs did and why they made the change. So that, again, the whole point is we have that audit trail, we have that history of what changes were made by whom, including the agents, including the LLMs.
This ends up being really helpful because we touch so many different things. I know exactly if Dustin's working on it, I'm working on it, we can have handoffs and whatever else. So that's the actual press release. What I can also do, we have a messaging lab down below, and I'm gonna have, just go crazy here. What if Verdanix did nothing further in this?
And as a reminder, this is not just chatting with like Claude or Gemini. These are audiences that we've built using our data, our clients' data, Axiom data. So if you did nothing, likely worsen public sentiment and distrust. What if we supported some of the local funding? I don't know. You guys are the crisis experts. What should we be doing here, guys?
You know, while you're typing that in.
What does the crowd want to see us do? Someone here must have an idea. Oh, wow.
This is the most
actively engaged group.
The demo right here. Anybody can ask a question, and we will punch it in and see what happens. So I'm going to ask the question of, first off, if they did nothing else, what's going to happen to the conversation? I'm now going to follow up and be like, what if they actually supported some sort of local funding based on, you know, the community efforts, did some local media engagement, and then really understood like what's most important to the actual community. And I'm hoping this will work.
Yeah, and look, I mean, these are, you know, intuitively we understand kind of where this would go and why we would get responses like this. But this just gives us another layer of validation, confidence. As we're putting things in, we only get one chance to respond, right? We're throwing things into the jungle. This isn't the zoo, as our chief creative officer likes to say. And so this gives us high confidence in advance of any of the response management that we're doing.
Right. You can also, and we have, build this with custom synthetic audiences that are much more precise than the three that we're showing here.
Yeah.
Right? So we could literally have a synthetic audience loaded in here that is the exact fence line community that is affected. In fact, you could have one for the local political side of the fence line community, and you could have one for the residents, and you could have one for the first responders. You know, and then you could be testing your response against all of those in addition to everything else. And then, of course, the more comprehensive the data that you have access to, the more comprehensive the effective mini LLM that sits underneath each of those audiences is. And we have some clients who have built very sophisticated LLMs that have our synthetic audiences sitting on top of them, that they will test everything that you can imagine against those audiences before they go out into the world with them.
I mean, if you think about it, right, if your CEO or the board calls and wants to understand what are the implications of engaging or not engaging, right, you now have a real-time, data-backed, insight-informed way to say, here are the preliminary puts and takes on this, right? We're thinking about this from a K Street, Main Street, and Wall Street perspective. We understand the interplay of them, and we have the ability to think through what are some of the preliminary decisions so that we can say we should or shouldn't react with greater confidence than like, well, maybe the wind's blowing this way right now, right? And that's not to say that you're always going to know 100%, but you're going to know a lot faster in real time with greater conviction on the decision with something like this than you would otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, just a couple more macro points before we wrap. One is, you know, we intentionally built the architecture the way we did so that that agent layer that Jim was talking about, we can surface with our clients in chat interface, should we choose to, or we can surface it in any of the modules that we choose to. But the idea is that it's extensible and it's infrastructure. It's not a tool or, you know, a singular use object. And that's how our agency now is evolving, is we're building out a system across the entire agency. And then lastly, exactly what Patrick was getting ready to show here, you can see the level of detail that we've taken with our clients and with our engineering teams to build out the individual kind of orchestration elements of this that actually bring it all together and allow it to scale the way that it can.
Patrick, you should explain what people are seeing here.
Yeah. So real quickly, the orange boxes are actually the individual agents behind the scenes. I took a cap of this, and just to make sure that I wasn't blowing up the back end here with our live clients. But each of those orange boxes are actually an agent within the system. It has a task. One listens to what's going on in terms of like the conversation based on this topic. Another one looks at the audiences. As Jim said, a couple of them actually manifests. For example, we have clients that personify a group of different type of media, like whatever those things are. Every single time we run a scenario, every single time we generate a piece of content, one of these agents activates and starts to orchestrate itself based on things like what is the user entering? How do the agents start to line up the data and then provide the actual scenarios back? Each of these nodes is actually a scenario, and we can dive deep into like what are people entering in the text, how are they posting back to our LLM or the actual persona. And so what ends up happening here is we build not only the agents, the orchestration, but also the knowledge of every single thing that happens, and that gets cataloged back. And so as we run through each of these scenarios, it gets enriched over and over again based on our decision making.
So everything over there on the left.
Zoom all the way out. Zoom all the way out. Just to
everything over there on the left is an agent, right? It's a list of agents, right? And these agents are all talking to each other, and they're orchestrated, and they're connecting to what effectively are nodes that are then sending stuff to you as the human to either review or to bless or to send back to the agents to do more work and then bring it back to you again. But when it zooms out, you can see what we're looking at here, which is a significant amount of tech. It's all built to effectively automate what could be half of an in-house crisis or issues communications function. Still with human in the loop, of course, which is that judgment, that creativity, that insight, that experience. But think about the speed that you will now have as a result of something like this. Think about the precision. Think about the type of scale that you can reach if you're trying to navigate a really complex situation in real time. And this is an example that is specific. It's a use case for a crisis or risk situation. But like if you look at this and then you start to think about the rest of what a communications function does, and you start to apply, right? You start to apply similar logic. You can think about how this might have an implication for an internal communications team. Might have a broader implication for an external communications team. And what we're effectively looking at here is the future of a significant portion of our profession.
And there's an audit trail and compliance function in this, right? For many of you who sit in highly regulated industries and companies that are public, perhaps, the conviction that you can have with your legal and compliance teams on the ability to make decisions with precision, with data, and an audit trail is an important part of your business and your ability to kind of interoperably work in functions along with legal and compliance. And so for those of you who maybe have GCs or compliance teams that are always asking about things, this is a degree of comfort in an era where we haven't been able to necessarily have that paper trail in the same way.
There must be some questions in the crowd. Good, okay. So I'm going to start. Here, go ahead, you go first. You get the best seat, so you get to go first.
Oh, do we have mics?
Do we have a mic situation here?
If you tell us, we'll repeat it. We'll repeat it. Yeah.
Let me repeat the question back to the audience. Number one, organizations might have sentiment, social media, listening tools, Why would someone want to come to this platform versus that? And let me answer that first before we go to the second part. We have like context, and I talked about context engineering is really important. We need to understand at any given time what's happening in the media landscape, how stakeholders are engaging or not engaging, and understanding. And then more importantly, also, how are people prompting for this intelligence, right? There's that piece of it. There's nothing out there. Those tools are great in terms of understanding what's happening, but really understanding the collective of like how it's happening across all different, not only platforms, media outlets, but also how people are discovering the information. You need an analysis tool that feeds that in, does the analysis, and then feeds it into the context of what's happening from a program. And so it's not an either or, it's an and. And so our platform has at the front end intelligence monitoring that can do all of that as well, and then it feeds it in, and then you can start to program around what's happening at a given point, and then start to manipulate and challenge, how audiences might engage.
So
Very
before you answer the second part of it, let me also just give you an even more simple answer to your question, which is like we can just plug everything that you're describing right into the system. You can plug your existing sentiment analysis in. If you have TalkWalker or whatever you're using, you can plug it right in. We're not trying to create a better version of an agentic monitoring tool or like a monitoring tool, right? That the custom tech that we have built, it's not for that. I mean, it can be that too, but like that's not the point of it, right? The point of it is like take your data source, whatever it is, or take your data sources, whatever they are, and then feed them into our agentic system, and then what you essentially get is the ability to, do what you previously were doing with maybe a very large team that was moving at a speed that was not the speed of today's world. And instead you can do a smaller team at the speed that is ahead of today's world.
And sorry, the second question, just quickly, you ask about who's loading the context in. We've had both situations where clients, once they get legal approval and everything else, have it loaded into a secure cloud environment that we work with, or if they open it up to us, we'll load it in there. But either way, it's in a secure cloud environment. Hence, the infrastructure being so key and the Google partnership being so key for us is that secure environment and extensibility.
Right. So if you have, like Dustin said, Google as your partner and they're providing your tech and the security around it, your clients are going to be much more likely to either themselves or with you load sensitive information into the system. If someone is trying to replicate something like this using like ChatGPT, where literally they're training their models based on what you load in, that's going to be a big problem. And so that's why you always need to be very weary of anybody who's essentially trying to offer a solution that is the equivalent of like a custom chatbot on top of a model that already exists and is insecure, which is a lot of what you see out there.
Typically, in a situation, it is about action or no action, inaction. And there is this whole thing about Streisand effect. The more we react, the more people will get fed. So do you simulate, let's say, stock price movement of inaction versus action?
Yes. Yes. In this instance, no. Yeah. Yeah, you can, within reason, anything that is quantifiable can be built into the system. It just depends on if you want to take the time and resources in order to do that or not. But these are all custom based on the client need. And so if that's what's most important for a client and a client wants to factor that into the predictive modeling, then the answer is yes.
This is all internal.
Yes.
Would you ever license it to clients like a SaaS model?
I'll take that one. We will potentially offer a platform solution to clients. I don't know if licensing it like a SaaS model is the way that we would do that. But yes, there's a scenario where if clients just want access to the platform, that we would allow them to have access to the platform. Sure. There's a number of ways that we're doing that. I think the current one that is most common, because this particular use case resonates so well with clients is that they typically will look at doing a version of this 3 different ways. We talk about 3 different ways?
Yeah, I mean, one is essentially mostly subscription to the platform with a light set of services on top of it, right? The other one is we're co-creating with them and building either kind of in our infrastructure or theirs, but because so much of the logic is beneath the surface, we can port it as needed. And then there are a handful where it's just pure custom in their environment, and we're creating a version of this in their environment. All 3 are perfectly feasible outcomes. There's just different capital outlays and speed, depending on which path.
Yeah. But if what both of you are getting at is like, does this mean that we think that, you know, in 5 years, Weber Shandwick will be exclusively a technology company that is, you know, SaaS, you know, product-based solution? The answer is no. We think that the future is very much services and tech together, but a lot more tech than previously was part of the equation for both us and the profession more broadly, right?
When the model gives you an answer that disagrees with all of your wisdom and experience and personal judgment about what the solution should be?
Yes. In that case, you reject it. Or you send it against an agent that is essentially evaluating what the other agent has produced, and you have the agents competing with each other to prove why each of them are right, and then you have them give you the results of that competition as well as the logic for each.
How many times does the follow-up question,
yeah.
How many times does the system have to prove that it was right and you were wrong before you change your mind about that?
That depends on the client.
Yeah, the client.
Because the client is normally the one who's making the final call on a situation like that. And look, it's the whole point of human in the loop, and it's the whole point of why, I don't know if Russell said it today, but he certainly said it at this thing I did with him a week or 2 ago. He was like, you know, there should never be a scenario where the human is not the final reviewer, right? Because we've all seen the tech hallucinate. We've all seen all the models hallucinate. And so we would never allow for a scenario where you would just go out into the world with something that, you know, the system has auto-generated for you without that proper review. And there's a reason we have agents that in their entire jobs are essentially to challenge the results of the other agents that have created the content from the system, right? You can even have agents that are designed to correct maybe just your own personal unconscious bias. Maybe a company has an unconscious bias in a certain direction, and you just want to, you know, double check at the last minute before you go live with something that's not included, and you just run it against the agent.
That the industry has an unconscious bias towards action over inaction. So there's a mindset that it's always better to do something than to do nothing.
Yeah.
And it would be great to have a system that could give real weight to the do-nothing argument.
Right, yeah. I certainly see that too, Paul, especially when the industry's pricing model is largely built based on time and materials. And there's typically more time and materials associated with doing something than doing nothing. Go ahead.
I'm just interested to hear about how you train the human in the loop. Because obviously the people on the stage now and the people in the room here, we've all had 20, 30 years of being in these scenarios and making that judgment call. What happens 10, 20 years down the line when our trainees haven't had the real life experience? How do we do that? Because we'll all be retired by then, I hope. So I'm just interested in that element of the human in the loop.
Right, so essentially, how do you ensure that 5, 10 years from now, the crisis practitioner who has 5 or 10 years of experience has actually done enough crisis work to be able to provide the judgment call on the back end of the human in the loop? I mean, like, that's an existential question. And so to answer it, I'm going to turn to Shannon.
Nothing like being put on the spot. No. You know, I think that's what I was getting at a little bit earlier, right? Is that it's incumbent on us now to be thinking about the application of these tools, not just for us who have been doing this for eons, right? But for upcoming generations, right? And I think some of that changes the way the business functions. And again, to your point, the pricing model, right? Because of time, labor, and materials, we need to be investing time in making sure that our early stage employees are learning boots on the ground, boots on the system, I guess, if you will, right? On how this works and functions, when it works well and when it doesn't, right? Because if we're not taking the time to invest, train, and showcase how to handle challenging situations, when the agent is wrong, when the agent is right, in all scenarios and complexities, then we're not really doing our jobs to prepare and equip the next generation of leaders. And by default, we are not doing our jobs to serve our clients very well, right? And since, you know, our word and our reputation is all dependent on this, it's in all of our collective best interest to invest in that time and training and technology and expertise, right? Because the future of our business is equal parts human and AI, and that equitable breakdown may shift and ebb and flow over time, and we need to invest now and better understand those puts and takes so we're prepared for our own risks here if we're not doing that.
Yeah, I think, thank you. I think that when you think about the way that some management consulting firms, for example, are approaching their talent strategies right now, and they're declaring that they are trying to reduce the number of people at the lower levels within their organizations, right? And we know who these companies are. They've said this publicly. I'm not going to get into it. But there's another approach, which is the approach that we are taking at Weber Shandwick, and the approach that the smart management consulting firms, in my opinion, are taking, which is that it's going to always be important to have employees at every level. And the reason for that is exactly to address the problem that you described. Whereas if you are not incubating the crisis advisors of the future from the beginning of their career on up, then they're not going to be able at the 10, 15, 20 year of experience mark to actually be the human in the loop at the end. And so I think that we will always need employees at pretty much every level within an organization. The amount of them might change, the balance might shift. You might actually see like an increase need for the mid-level employees, especially if all of them are at that point like essentially running teams of agents and people, hybrid teams, right? Some humans in the loop here, some agents. The whole thing is your job is to essentially orchestrate that system. I think that will be. I mean, it already is. And I think for us in particular, like we have a lot. We're trying to hire right now a lot of people at the kind of mid-level as agentic leads that are very domain specific. And so I think that you'll see some shifts, but I think that we will always need to have people at all levels, and that's the way you avoid that scenario.
Very quickly, the number of simulations we can run now with our junior staff to get them comfortable, it's unlimited spring training, unlimited training camp, right? So that's helpful too, yeah. All right,
go ahead.
Hi, I'm Lexi. I'm an Oregon State student, and my question is, what can students do to become more competitive candidates with AI changing the employment game as universities adapted to the changing workforce?
I think that's easy, and that's what I said earlier, which is if you're better than everybody else at using AI, then you're going to be a better candidate for a job.
I'll throw one more thing as kind of on the technology side. The people that we find the most valuable are also the ones that have high EQ, right? Just the ability to build relationships, work across teams. There's just so much collaboration. So keep the EQ skills high.
Can I add to that real quick? Since we run like a lot of programs for third and fourth year students, and we spend a lot of time at universities. It's great to know like about AI, but we actually want to know what you make. Like when you send stuff to us and we talk to you, what are you making? What are your hands on keyboard? Like what are the types of experiments you're running? What are things you're trying, even if they're not successful? Like everybody has ChatGPT generative AI on their resume these days. That's great. By the way, we can tell when resumes are written by AI as well. So what are you actually creating and making and testing?
Also, we don't actually care if the resume's first draft is AI generated, as long as it's a really good resume that the AI has generated first with you, human in the loop, reviewing on top of.
Yeah.
So, a lot of, it's interesting because people who were in college or high school or whatever in the era of like AI is a bad thing that means you're cheating. Like this is that's a mindset shift for people who are in that. So if you're asking in part from that perspective, now you have at least our take on the answer. Go ahead.
Just a couple of commercial questions. I'm just wondering, what's the entry-level price point? And also, how do you make this realistic budget-wise in Madrid, Lima, Canberra, and Singapore, as much as it is in New York, LA, and DC?
Well, the first question I'm not going to answer. The second question, I don't know if it ever will be in the same way. The product might be different in order to make the budget work in those markets. So, like if you're a Fortune 10 company and you're already spending $50 million on comms support, then the fidelity of the product that you expect, the quality of the product you expect, is going to need to be as good as what you're currently getting for your $50 million comms team budget spend. If you're in Lima, I used to live in Lima. I don't know anyone in Lima who spends that kind of money, and so or expects the same level of fidelity. And so maybe there's a solution that targets a different type of buyer that is less sophisticated but still delivers on the need, and that's probably where that goes. Yeah.
From a technology perspective, language borders don't really matter here. So that's super helpful.
Yeah. Any final questions?
I think she had her hand
Okay, go ahead.
So Hi. One final question. I know it's new. Thanks for this great overview, Shannon and Jim and friends. What are your clients saying so far?
Yeah, I think our clients are, they're very bullish about what this is going to allow them to do. And so this is pretty early days, right? Like this kind of thing wouldn't even have been possible a year ago. I guess maybe technically it would have been possible, but in our profession, I would argue it would have been impossible a year ago. And to our knowledge, something that is this level of agentic with the degree of quality and fidelity that we're producing, I haven't seen anyone else with it. If so, I'd love to. So I think our clients are quite bullish and excited by it. It depends on how they want to use it. Some very specific to a situation like the one we described today, that's a manageable bite-sized opportunity to maybe, if you're a CCO, to make a dent in something that you might be either unhappy with your existing team's ability to do the way you want it done, or maybe you're under pressure from your CEO to use more AI, and so this is a great use case for you in order to do that. We now increasingly have clients, and this is where it's going to be it's going to be very interesting, who see this and they're like, can you help? Can we do this? But instead of playing defense, can this play offense for us, right? And so, in the what is it for some clients, an agent that when it's not playing defense, we use the same agent, but we reskin it in order to.
Yeah, it's the flip side of the same coin. I mean, it's trained largely on the same logic, but if it's vetting new campaign ideas and then pressure testing those, that's different than risk response, but the technology is very similar.
Right. So you can take an agent that's playing defense, and you can reskin it to help you play offense, right? And instead of testing something against an audience to measure risk, you can test something against an audience to measure purchase intent, and that's where it starts to get quite interesting. Supportive marketing communications.
Can I add one thing to that? So I think your question's a really good one, and 10 years ago, crisis response for issues that impacted a business originated in forums that were more squarely business-oriented. Today, crises are originating in culture and feeding into business and vice versa. And so knowing where your risk parameters are, where the conversation is going, and the implications in either direction for your stakeholders, whether that's Main Street, Wall Street, K Street, or beyond, are a lot more complicated than they've ever been, right? And so as the intersection of business and culture they conflate together, and reputation and valuation are on the line there, your ability to deliver a plan, whether that's to respond or not respond, maybe depending on the situation, is really critical to maintaining trust, credibility, your stock price, your ability to keep your employees feeling proud and inspired to work for your company, right? As you look to grow market share, as you look to maintain your space in the communities in which you operate, the information and data that can help guide both the normal course planning intensive so that we don't end up in this situation, or the reactive, we're in this situation, how do we best navigate this, right? This is leading edge technology that enables you to do it much more deftly than you were ever able to before at speed and scale. Right, and so as we think about that, the application of this really doesn't know an end here, right? It would enable us to ultimately be more versant in protecting our company's reputation and valuation and license to operate, right? Like that Dutch proverb from John Thornback, right? Trust comes in on foot and leaves on horseback. We all know that all too well, right? And so as we look to preserve and protect the integrity of our organizations, the work we're doing, this is a really important tool to be able to help customers on the offensive or defensive manage this in a much more agile manner.
All right.
All right, we're getting the red light.
Thank you, Shannon.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Okay.